Hello everyone! Welcome to Wandering DM's channel. I'm Paul Siegel. I'll be your host and moderator tonight for our excellent panel. Our panel is called Zoom and Enhance, Getting the Most Out of Online RPGs, and I'm joined by several amazing guests today. So let's do some quick introductions. I will kick us off maybe, and then I'll call folks' names out, and you can say hello and tell us a little about yourself. My name's Paul. Pronouns are he, him. You can find me online on Wandering DMs. This is a channel right here. We host a weekly Sunday talk show at 1 p.m. about D&D and other role-playing game stuff. I also host a online actual play every Thursday night called 10 Dead Rats from 8 to 10. And that's Eastern Time. And I also working on a new web series called The Big Bad, which you can find out more about on our website, wanderingdms.com/thebigbad. That's a new tournament-style competitive D&D web series coming out this fall, possibly with maybe some of the fine folks on this panel. So let's start in the top left. Brittany, hi, can you tell us your name, your pronouns, where your work can be found, and a little bit about the stuff you do online?
Yeah, sounds good. Hi, everyone. I'm Brittany Leonagay. My pronouns are she, they. You can find me online at Brittany Lee, where you can find kind of my personal stuff. And you can also find me on at D20 Dames, which is an all-femme RPG podcast where we're currently playing D&D. We'll probably be playing another system in the future. And yeah, by day, I work for Facebook Gaming, thus the ridiculous chair. It's so silly. It's very ridiculous, I know. And yeah, I produce and play in the D20 Dames podcast. And I have a home game right now that is a Masks game that I'm also playing online.
Awesome, yeah. Excellent. Thanks so much. Emma.
Hi, I'm Emma Lambert. I am the comms director of WebDM. You might know us. We are on YouTube. We do a weekly, semi-weekly show there. Bi-weekly, semi-weekly, you know the difference, hopefully. It's every other week. And we've got a Patreon podcast, and we also have a Twitch channel where we stream all different kinds of games. Currently, we've got a game of Knights Black Agents going there right now. Personally, I've played in, I'd say, about a half to two-thirds of all the games that we have on our Twitch channel. I've played on many others, and we also have an offline, a non-streamed online home game we are doing right now, which is quite a bit of fun.
Excellent. Welcome. Hello, Leon.
Hi, I'm Leon. My pronouns are they, them, or he, him. I'm a professional game master in the New York City area. I'm also a writer and an editor on the DMs Guild. You can find me on Twitter at Beryllion, my website with the same name. Right now, I have 2 ongoing professional Dungeons & Dragons games that happen once a week. I do those on Roll20 and use several other technologies to do that. And I also play and run other systems and other non-professional home games as well.
Excellent. And now to my side here, the Dungeon Dudes, Kelly and Monty.
I'm Monty Martin.
I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
And we are the Dungeon Dudes. We post new videos every Tuesday and Thursday on our YouTube channel, Dungeon Dudes YouTube channel, where we cover everything D&D, advice for players, guides for dungeon masters, and you can find that all right up on our YouTube channel, our weekly videos.
Yeah, so Kelly, he, him, and we also have our live play D&D campaign, which is currently in Season 2, which we're calling Shadows of Drakenheim. We were playing live in person, and that airs Tuesday nights on twitch.tv/dungeon_dudes. Obviously, recently we had to move to an online format and discover all the joys and wonders of that, which has actually been a lot of fun. So you can still check that out on Tuesday nights. We are taking a little break right now, but we're coming back on August 11th with a new episode of Shadows of Drakenheim.
Awesome. And last but not least, Xiaoling.
Hey everyone, I'm Xiaoling. No preferences on pronouns. Generally, people use she, her. I work at Wizards of the Coast. I am actually in the digital publishing and licensing team, so I don't work on the D&D product directly. My team helps us to execute and work with partners who do create D&D products like Baldur's Gate and other fun things that we hope to tell people about very, very soon. I'm currently playing multiple games of D&D online with different people around the office, so I can give some insight into what other Wizards folks do for their digital games. Personally, I am a big fan of 10 Candles as a system, and I've been doing a lot of exploration and playing online with that. So that's anywhere from playing on Zoom to Discord to Roll20. I think we had something called VTT that one of our team members introduced us to, which is a cool brand new board game simulation system. And I'm excited to be here with everybody today.
Excellent, excellent. All right, so we are here to talk about very topical for an online convention, how to get the most out of playing online. How is it different from playing a tabletop? What can you do to improve your game? I'm sure that lots of folks have lots of questions. If you do have questions, we're going to do about an hour of casual chat here, and then we've saved half an hour at the end for Q&A. If you have a question, please post to the chat with question at the beginning. That will help us locate those questions and queue them up for the Q&A at the end. Thanks so much. So let me kick us off with like does anybody have like a big ticket, like what is the one piece of advice you would give to someone who says, I've been playing D&D for years, doing it at the tabletop, I'm switching to online, what should I do? Anyone got one?
Oh, I have. This is a hard lesson that I had to learn. Your communication tactics and your table etiquette must change between playing at home and playing online. Even something very simple as telling a joke at the table might land really, really well, and telling a joke online might end with a bunch of people going, "What? I didn't catch that. You go ahead, you talk." And so, as someone who likes to think they have very good comedic timing, I had to relearn that online because people don't know when they should talk. There's video lag, so you don't really have the body language that you're used to. Even if it's people that you've played with for a very long time, you're going to talk over each other. You're not going to be able to anticipate when somebody wants to say something is easier. And so what I found I had to do was establish more concrete rules for how everyone should communicate, and when is an appropriate time to say something, what you should put in chat over what you should say out loud. So yeah, I would say that communication tactics, being very explicit about here's how we're going to make this leap, definitely helped me.
I think that's a really great point, right? That you have to anticipate the lag that you're going to get, right? Everyone's experiencing everything at slightly different times, maybe upwards of a half a second if your connection is good, maybe worse. And we all have to take turns, right? When we're at the table, especially if you have a big table, maybe you can have a little side conversation with the person next to you. But when we're all online, right, when I'm talking, all of you guys can't.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that is a big lesson that I had is I used to sit at the table and I would nudge Joe next to me and be like, I'm going to use this spell next turn. And we would have that quick little banter. But if we're playing online, any quick banter immediately cuts off anybody else that's talking. So you really had to learn to give people the space and room to do what they're going to do and say what they're going to say before you interject or say anything.
I'm finding a lot of meeting management skills are turning out to be super useful for DMing skills because I deal a lot with international partners, so you send out the agenda in advance. So I've gotten templates now of here's the game, here's the premise, here's the Zoom call information, here's the channel, and I'm just copying and pasting when I send out invites to people. With work meetings, many people don't read any of the things that I sent out in advance. So at the start of the meeting, there's a recap where I go over all of that in a quick way and point people to where they can find the information that was in their invite. And so I think, it's a lot of what Leon said about establishing expectations and making sure that depending on, because again, I don't know where people are coming from. When they are in my living room and we're playing, I know where you are. I know I just fed you, and I know your attention is mine. But like when we're playing digitally, like, and especially with friends who are across the country, like you could have finished dinner, you could be waiting for dinner. I don't know what the context is for you right now, and having those kind of tent poles really helps to bring everybody into the same space.
I think that for on the other side of communication, recognize that there's so many digital tools that exist for running a virtual tabletop and for playing Dungeons & Dragons online. But just like when you play Dungeons & Dragons and role-playing games in person, the choice of do you use maps, miniatures, terrain, and other accessories, that's not essential to the DNA of Dungeons & Dragons and role-playing games. And so a virtual tabletop is actually not essential to the DNA of an online game either. So experiment and find the right balance for your group, because just like it can be very intimidating, expensive, and time-consuming to go out and buy a ton of miniatures, paint them, get a bunch of fancy Dwarven Forge terrain, you can spend just as much time setting up a virtual tabletop, getting tokens, creating maps, doing all these things, and that might not actually that can enhance the experience, but it might not necessarily be the right choice for you. And so the minimum viable technological product is something that is worth trying, just like it's worth trying playing D&D Theater of the Mind style.
You know, it's a really good point that, like, the style of game you're playing is going to vastly impact the technology that you choose, right? Like, you know, whether you're playing Theater of Mind or you want miniatures, whether you're playing D&D or a different system. In fact, I'm gonna provoke here a disagreement that was starting to brew just moments before we came on live. Video chat versus no video chat. Brittany, what do you think?
I have a very different view here than I think the rest of the crew. So first of all, I started my first D&D campaign I ever played was virtual, and it was on Roll20, and we tried to use video, and at the time, this is about 5 or 6 years ago, it was not, the video made everyone's connection worse, and so we were just like, oh, just don't use the video, let's just use audio. And so I never really played without that experience. And then for D20 Games, a podcast that I've been doing for the past few years, we find it's actually more valuable if you're recording and you're trying to put this out for an audience. If we put video on, we are then removing cues that we would normally have to like speak out loud. So a look to someone and a giggle and a thumbs up and a wink wink, which we would normally have to say out loud and communicate, which gets onto the recording and then we can edit later, gets removed. Or an I go there, or I talk to this person. You take in those at the table cues that you're used to, and then they don't come through on the podcast when people are listening. And that's something that we kind of figured out pretty quickly. Specifically me, when I was first editing our episodes, I was like, oh, I don't know what they're talking about. And I don't know, like you're so used to these things that you can do at the table. But when it translates to a podcast only, this is obviously different for streams. You should probably have video when you're streaming. Big proponent of like, please do that. But for audio only podcast, it really is, it actually takes away, I think, from the experience, and it makes it a lot harder to edit and communicate what you're trying to communicate later. So yeah, that's my hot take.
For my Sunday talk show, Wandering DMs, we do it as a video show, but then we also scrape the audio and post that as a podcast, and we're constantly reminding ourselves as we do it, like, oh, don't just show a thing on a camera, right? You actually have to describe it for the sake of those podcasters. For folks who are playing at home, who aren't, broadcasting or archiving their game, there's still an argument, I think, to be made that, if you're dealing with very low-end technology, maybe you don't have great bandwidth, you can save a lot of bandwidth by going audio only, right?
Absolutely. I've been a proponent, because we've been talking to our community a lot about this, especially since March, about how do I do this? How do I make this happen? And the thing that we've come to, and sort of people talking to us about their issues with this, is that you really kind of have to accommodate the lowest tech availability in your group for everybody to really have fun. It won't necessarily work out if you're super duper into Roll20 and you're super duper into like having all the bells and whistles, but then you've got like, you know, your great Aunt Sally over here who barely knows how to turn on the computer. It's not necessarily going to be a good time for everybody. But there are some ways around that, like delegating a tech person, like this is your designated tech person, so that the DM can DM and tech person can do tech, and you don't necessarily have to plumb the depths of doing IT on your friends. That might be a good thing, depending. But for sure, yeah, there's a lot of different choices involved.
You know, I think you're bringing up sort of my answer to my initial loaded question of top advice. The first thing I would tell anyone is practice the tech first, right? Like, there is nothing more stressful, I think, than setting up a game and then starting in on that time that you've mentally prepared to be fun D&D time, and then spend it instead troubleshooting everyone's internet, right? Like, do
Absolutely.
that separately first as a different call. You know, call each other. Find out if it works. Find out if the technology works. Play with the different technology.
We had a slow grow for ourselves because we were streaming as well, and we had the rapid conversion, but we started out with just not using a virtual tabletop, and we tried several different voice and video call services. We tried Discord, we tried Zoom, we tried Skype, we tried Google Hangouts. We actually tried them all, and we kind of had a technical session zero. Where we experimented with the different platforms and found which ones gave the most reliable connection for everybody that was involved in the project, and we weren't committed to any one. And ultimately, we found that Zoom worked best for us, but that was also because it had a balance of both what we needed to communicate with each other as players, but also because it gave us the most flexibility for our streaming setup as well. I do think that the video element does add a lot. There's a lot of body language, and a lot of that. You gain a lot from that face-to-face connection, and so I think it is worth it. It adds a lot of work to it, and certainly there's always going to be people who you know. Good luck finding a webcam if you don't have one already these days, and especially with microphones and everything else added on top of that, it actually is quite expensive to get everybody with a video and audio setup that is of a good quality. I think you gain a lot from doing that, but it is something that has to be measured out carefully with your group, and especially the expense, because a decent webcam will still be around $100.
Yeah, I think... you know, it's interesting that you ended up on Zoom. I know that my group, when I'm playing, we use Roll20 for the virtual tabletop, and I think, as Brittany was saying, we tried the video on that at first, and it just wasn't working for us. It just wasn't, for whatever reason, wasn't giving us the quality we wanted. We ended up going to Discord for our chat, and the nice thing about Discord, in addition to having audio and video chat, is that then you also get sort of a storage space, right? A persistent written chat where you can put notes and handouts and comments that stick around. Who else is using different stuff? Leon, Schelling, what are you guys using for video chat or for your games?
I'm actually doing a mix. So for me, it's actually about what audience I'm playing towards. Like, if it's a new group of people who I'm running a one-shot with and who I haven't played with, I will usually use Zoom because it's the lowest barrier to entry. It's a web page. I can send it out. People can call in if they want. Most of the time, I think we end up not using video for it because I'm not big on the visual pieces of having maps and moving pieces around. For the long-standing games, I have been migrating them to Discord, because there's two things. One is I can have multiple channels, and I can hook up various bots, so depending on what the game is. So I have a 10 candles Discord server, as well as a D&D Dragon Heist Discord server. So I'm able to pre-populate a lot of information. I have channels where, like, I surface, here's what's going on in the game, here's a map, here's all that, and there's a persistent record within the chat. And then there's a channel where you roll. so that's kept separately, and then there's a channel where you can do your character development and all that. And so it's nice to kind of have these different file areas, but it very much depends on who I'm playing with and what this game is about.
How about you, Leon?
For all the games that I run, I do the same as you. I use Discord for audio, and I use Roll20 for maps and for the VTT. The thing that I like about Discord audio, aside from the fact that a lot of the microphone sensitivity options and adjusting everybody's volume, etc., you can really personalize that experience to a user. And so if somebody's coming in way, 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 way loud, you can just turn them down a little bit instead of stopping the game and asking them to move a little bit further away from their microphone. But I also like the ability to install bots on your Discord server. So the one that I install whenever I start any Discord server is RhythmBot, which is the one that allows you to play YouTube videos YouTube videos, but in your audio chat. And it's like being able to share the aux cord with my players. I have one group very specifically who, two of them are composers, and the rest of them are huge anime nerds. And anytime there's a dramatic moment in the game, either I get the weirdest classical composition I've ever heard, or I get like Roundabout from Yes, but it's the JoJo reference. So it's like, and even that, like inviting them to take part in that part of the game, which was a huge part of us playing together at the table, was having a physical aux cord, really, really helps. I do want to talk a little bit about Roll20 and the real estate of the screen, because that's something that I find to be kind of an issue. Because if you look at the Roll20 screen, I really do like that they have the video down at the bottom of the screen and you can move it around. But sometimes that gets in the way of a lot of the visual stuff. And I do have I have groups who prefer to look at everybody's faces. There's a group that I play in, and they're all actors except for me, and they just they need to look at everybody's faces so that they can read that body language and tell that story. And then I have groups that are playing more dungeon-oriented games, like we just went through Ghosts of Saltmarsh, which is every chapter's a dungeon. So it's a little difficult to say oh, I'm in this room of the dungeon positioned in this very specific square without having a VTT to sort of keep that information for you. And so a lot of times, and I still don't have a great solution to this problem, it can be difficult for me with the real estate of my one screen to be able to have video and also maps at the same time.
It really is a problem that is only solved in one way, with multiple monitors, especially for us streaming, because I'm hosting the stream and on video call and running all this. I have 4 screens in front of me when I'm running the game. And yes, it's overkill. That's a preference thing. But certainly the screen real estate problem is real, and I totally feel you on it. And unfortunately, the only elegant solution to it is an extra monitor. But one of the things that I would say to that is that if you do have a television set in your home that you're able to orient around, it might be you can often get a laptop adapter or a second screen of some kind and hook one thing up in one other place. So there's all kinds of ingenious little ways to wrap around that. Some other things that can be cool and fun are if you happen to have a laptop and a tablet, what can you offload to the other device in some way? Sometimes those can be some helpful things. I know for us, we've always been having our character sheets on a tablet, and so that actually continued what we were doing. We continued to have the character sheets on tablets as we were playing, so that can solve it. But I totally hear you. The screen real estate thing is a nightmare.
That is absolutely, even as a player, so I'm not the one hosting, but I play in the game, and even I had to finagle a whole bunch of stuff on my one screen at home, and then I definitely started using my iPad as my notes, my character sheet, anything else that was going on that didn't need to be the VTT, or the way that I have my screen set up is it's 90% VTT, and then I have a little panel with the Zoom call along the side just so that I can see everybody's face. Because again, yes, I need to see their body language. We all play off of each other really well. So as a player, that's something that I need to look for, is the reactions of my other players as well. So even with me only having one monitor, having a tablet that at least has some of my peripheral information allows me to spread things out a little bit easier.
Can I hop in for a second? Because I'm hearing theme. And Monty brought it up, and I don't have a solution. I just have a problem that I want to bring up, which is this all sounds really expensive. And I feel, there's something about, we're all online now and everything is accessible and everyone can do everything now. Isn't that cool? But I'm hearing a ton of barriers to making it work great, and that's really, 100%. It's really unfortunate. So I'm wondering, and again, I don't have a solution here, but I'm wondering, like, when you strip all that down, and you, like, how can you still play that game, whether it's a game you had been playing or a new game that you're trying to start up? And I'm especially thinking of people who aren't in the hobby yet, who aren't playing yet but want to, and they see this and they're like, oh, this is a good time. I can play with anyone anywhere, and they're like, oh, I don't look like a professional streamer when my camera's on, or I don't have 2 screens to keep all my character sheets. Can I still play with paper? Can I still play with a pen? What helps make that connection for people, so that barrier of entry is still, really low, like RPG should, like, it's just, you just need a book and you just can go. It's like a little concerning to hear that, like, how expensive it might get to do it the right way or do it the best way.
I might pop up and say I've run games on conference calls before. I've done the most lo-fi games that you possibly can, where we have character sheets and we have a really crappy conference call, because I live in New England and phones don't work. And we did it that way because we were broke and had no money and had the internet wasn't up here yet in the way it needed to be. And there's totally ways to get around it. Personally, I'm cheap as heck, and so I just jump around on tabs on one laptop. And I try to keep it very, very, like, lo-fi. But yeah, absolutely. This is one of many ways that you can spend way too much money to make a thing that works absolutely perfectly for you. But at the same time, there's ways to do it. There's ways to sort of finagle everything so that you can still see everybody. And there's a lot of ways to do this for free. I just finished a playtest that had 9 players and 2 DMs that was 100% on Discord, which meant that it was free. It was difficult, but it was free. So I think that's, like, there's ways around it. And then there's also, it's like anything else where you can decide sort of the tech level and price point you want to go to. But I think from somebody who has played these things with nothing for a very long time, like, you don't need a ton even to do it online. Yeah.
I think that, like, if we are talking about, like, the using VTTs and having digital character sheets and all of that, these are all optional things. And I know a lot of people that just play text-based campaigns on Discord. Like, they don't even do voice. Like, there's text-based campaigns. You could have a piece of paper in front of you and a pencil to do your character sheet. And if you wanted to use a VTT or not, that is also optional. So I do think that a lot of tabletop role-playing games lend themselves to the option of being completely free. It's just crazy people like us who decide that 75% of our income is going to be spent on improving our Dungeons & Dragons setup is something that not everybody's going to do, and we're insane for that. But it is something to talk about. I know we did a video on, like, behind the scenes on our Dungeon Master setups, and a lot of people are like, well, I'll never have all of that. And I was like, yeah, this took like 10 years of collecting things to get up to that point, and that was a choice that I made. But when I started playing D&D, it was a piece of paper and some dice, and that was it. And, like, if you can get on a video chat or on a text chat with your friends with a piece of paper and some dice, you can play tabletop role-playing games. So I think that's important to remember for anybody who's trying to break into this.
Yeah. I think also, like, what game you're playing makes a big difference here, right? Like, if you're playing a very crunchy, grid-based, miniature moving game, then maybe you really want a good virtual tabletop. But might flip that on its head and say, well, we don't have, we have poor network, or we don't have the ability for everyone to get onto video chat and have multiple monitors and whatnot. So what games can we play knowing the technology that we have? Sort of, if you start there, I think you might find yourself exploring other types of games, right? Maybe more story games, or lighter games that don't need as many physical pieces and as much visual fidelity.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm thinking just for D20 games, we are heavily role play. We're playing Dungeons and Dragons, so obviously, we have encounters, we fight, but it's a lot of role play, and I think that contributes to the fact of just because we are just on Discord, just recording our voices, the role play goes a lot smoother than having that tactical. So for us, it definitely does feel more natural. And I'm actually wondering, because we've been doing this the whole time, did the method that we are playing contribute to the heavy role play, or are we doing heavy role play because I don't know which game first, actually. I want to kind of trace the origins, because now I'm thinking oh, maybe we do that because it is easier and it flows better. But yeah, it's interesting.
Or your role play is the tail that wags the dog, huh?
Yeah, who is snake? It's a snake thing.
Awesome.
Snake eating its own tail.
I mean, I think it is interesting, though, that when you do start getting in that area of investing in technology, and you're saying, okay, well, I want to, improve my setup. What should I buy? I think most people, the first thing they think of tends to be cameras, microphones, but probably actually the first thing you should be thinking of is that second monitor. I feel like that's probably the thing that's gonna boost your game more.
I think the microphone is the number one.
Yeah, the microphone.
I think if anything, this is like YouTuber 101. You see a lot of people that start streaming, that start trying to do stuff on social media, where they go out and they spend a lot of money on a camera, or they spend a lot of money on a camera, buy the cheapest lights they can get, and then hook up a very inexpensive microphone. And audio is actually, I think, it does actually highlight the importance of that. And if there was one thing that I would recommend spending the money on, it would be having a very good pair of headphones that are comfortable to wear for a couple hours, and ideally a headset microphone like this. This pair of headphones that I'm wearing right now are a Philips pair with an attached mic that plugs in for this attachment is about $40 Canadian, which is, I guess, nothing US. We'll see what happens. And the headset is about I think it was about $100, and so I think that probably is cut that down by 30% for the price in US dollars. But I really recommend it. I think this is a V-Moda boom mic. And I really recommend this as a starter mic, because it gives you everything that you need in one package. It will work with almost anything, and the quality on the microphone is very good. And actually having the wearable piece is a nice piece to use. So yeah, it's a Philips headset with a V-Moda, and I'm pretty sure if you go on Amazon and look up the V-Moda Boom, it will come up as the buy it together with the whole thing, because it's such a popular combo. And thumbs up from me. And the other factor with audio, though, as well, and the sound is being aware of just the ambient noise, because crosstalk is a problem in online play. But if you have pets like a yappy dog, or if you even earlier today we had is the AC running, is the fan on, is there ambient music or noise in your area? It's actually really surprising how much those ambient noises that you don't notice in everyday life can get amplified by a microphone and end up in the microphones of everyone else. So the really easy way to solve that problem is push to talk is your friend.
Yep. Yeah, I think I saw that scroll by in our chat earlier. A lot of folks recommending push to talk. I would also underscore really headphones. Get everyone on headphones, right? Because I feel like folks are always surprised by that. Oh, it all sounds fine to me. It's you guys that are echoing. Well, actually, I'm the one causing the problem when that happens, right? Everyone else is echoing because your audio is all coming out of my speakers and going back into my microphone when I'm not talking. So yeah, totally agree with that. Get a good pair of headphones. And I hate to say that because I hate headphones. I absolutely hate them. All right, let's get into let's talk about like virtual tabletops because we kind of edged into that a little bit before and walked away from it. I've heard Roll20 come up a lot. Anybody using anything different?
Crickets.
Oh, Emma, we can't hear you. Are you muted, perhaps?
Muted. There we go. It has to happen every
Yep.
time
Yep.
you're having an online meeting. I used version 1 of Fantasy Grounds like 2.5 or 3 years ago, and I haven't used the newest version that they have, so I can't comment on that. But it was an interesting thing to try out compared to Roll20, which I actually have not used. I'm only just starting to use as like a crunchy tabletop. I've used it almost exclusively for story games, and then the last few months I've actually started using it in a D&D game with battle mats and stuff, and so it's been interesting to see the functionality of it. But Fantasy Grounds, it's really granular, really detailed, and you can change everything that you want to about it, is my understanding, and that was really fun. And I keep meaning to see the newer version and haven't been able to yet.
Great. Anybody using anything different? Sorry, I recently I was plugging a bit to folks. Vorpal Board, who I think is actually here at Gen Con. I think they did a presentation fairly recently, which you could probably dig up, which is really fascinating to me because I think it tries to kind of bridge the gap between a pure virtual tabletop like Fantasy Grounds or Roll20 and a physical tabletop. Basically, you're looking at a screen which has your video chat and your audio chat and your dice roller and that kind of stuff. But then there's also an app for your phone, and the intention is that you actually point your phone's camera at your physical tabletop, and that it becomes your virtual tabletop. It's just an image of your actual table. So you put your miniatures, you put your pieces or whatever, they're on the table, and you're still using all the stuff you used to use on the table. And all you need for this is your standard video chat, web browser stuff, and a phone.
I will say, to go against something that I said earlier, completely against, but more for home games, like for D20 games, we don't use anything visual necessarily. We drop some random stuff and have some secret messages in Discord, which is another great reason. Discord is great for that. But for home games, I'm finding without a tabletop, without a virtual tabletop, my mind wanders. My mind goes. I take a checkout. I'm cross-stitching. I just like, and when I did play on Roll20 and playing D&D, having the virtual tabletop, something I took for granted and didn't realize I was taking it for granted, is just that I was so zoomed into I was playing. I was with everyone playing. It wasn't my turn. I knew what I was going to do next. I was kind of hanging back, but I was really a part of what everyone else is doing. And without that connection, and even with video, without that connection, I find myself spacing out, and I hate that because it's like, I don't want to feel like I'm only playing 20%. I want to feel like I'm playing the entire time, even when I'm not talking or it's not my turn or whatever it is. And that might depend on the game that you're playing, but if you're maybe on the fence and haven't heard anyone's feedback, whether they like a virtual tabletop or not, think about that like unspoken thing where people might be, spacing out a little bit and might be a little distracted, and that's something that can bring everyone together. So I do miss that element of having a virtual tabletop and or a physical tabletop, really.
I think that's very dependent on the type of game you're playing. For instance, like running a 10 Candles game, which is a tragic horror RPG, the mechanics of the game itself are very player intensive, in that like the players actively participate in the world building, and it's built in consistent. Like every 20 minutes, you probably have to give some kind of input. And so like our virtual, like we don't have much of a tabletop. That game system doesn't require much of one. It's a Discord chat and then a dice rolling app, and we're good. And people have to pay attention, because otherwise you lose the thread of the story. Like that one is the GM role is a moderator in the game story, and less so the world builder who's shepherding people through a world. While as in D&D, I think you're right, having something that you can focus on helps you to immerse in the world. I've definitely felt the pain of that, because I generally run D&D as Theater of the Mind, and I ran a crunchy. It wasn't even that crunchy. It was 3 animated brooms against the level 1 party, and that that was a mess because I was like, in my head, here's a map and this is where you guys are positioned. And people were like, where am I again? Am I close enough to fight this? Can I do this? I'm like, oh God, I forgot. D&D rules require that I have to have a map for this to work well because otherwise people are just all over the place and they don't know what they can and can't do. And that detracts from the player's experience. So sorry, guys.
I think. Oh, sorry. For me, I've ran both Dungeons and Dragons and Monster of the Week, and the difference between those two systems, Monster of the Week, we use no virtual tabletop. There's no minis. There's no anything, and the reason is that like I'm usually painting a mystery for the players to solve, and usually there's one monster that they're going to go fight. But at the same time, when I'm a player in Monty's game, no matter how well Monty describes a scene, and we did a few sessions without a virtual tabletop, he could describe it perfectly, and I could listen and understand everything he said. And then when it gets to my turn, no matter what, I'm going to go, wait, who's in front of me again, and where's that other person, and who's nearby, and what was on the wall, and trying to come up with the ideas that I can use to explore the surroundings. Is much harder for me when I'm trying to remember the exact visual details of the entire area, as well as where every monster is. So I do think it does depend on the game you're playing, but with something where there's going to be multiple monsters, where details are key, it's nice to have a visual representation so you know where you are, where your allies are, where the monsters are. I love theater of the mind, but there's just sometimes when combat breaks out, I really want to see everything.
Yeah.
You know, another aspect of virtual tabletops that I find really important is the dice roller, and not just something that's going to generate random numbers, but I want to see a nice, big, juicy visual 3D die rolling around on the screen, and I want to know that it is completely synchronized with what everyone else is seeing, because I want that moment where we all see the die teeter for a second, and it's gonna be a natural 20. Oh, it's an 8. Darn it! Right, I love that experience at the table, and I want to see that in virtual space, which is only really possible, I think, with a few die rollers.
My controversial opinion is I'm going to keep rolling those physical dice, and you're never going to take them away from me. It does take trust, but actually, rolling physical dice with an online group is a great trust exercise. and in fact, I just think, the number one quality that a role-playing game group needs is trust between the players and the dungeon master. And if you want a trust-building exercise for your group, roll those physical dice with each other, and it's actually amazing how much I think it does increase that trustfulness. Like we've always had a lot of trust between our play group, and it's such an important quality. So while the die rollers are a lot of fun, and I love the integrations of things that happen in virtual tabletops or with add-ons like Roll20 and that are in Roll20 or D&D Beyond or the Beyond 20 sort of applet. They're really cool and really awesome. I still love rolling my physical dice.
I actually I brought this up on Twitter like 2 weeks ago, I think. I don't know if I necessarily have an opinion on rolling, like the actual act of rolling dice, and I know that might be blasphemous in a hobby like this. I love my dice. My computer is on top of my large dice box that has all of my beautiful rocks that I really have not touched in a very long time. But I think the problem for me is more as a dungeon master, being able to see the numbers. For things like group checks or like anytime that more than one person is rolling a die at the same time, I don't know if you all have had this experience of saying roll initiative, everybody rolls, and then they all blurt out their numbers at the same time. That is, infinitely harder online than it is in real life, and it's hard in real life. So one of the ways that my group has kind of moved around that, because some of them use the Roll20 dice rollers, some of them we roll physical dice, but we always put the numbers in the chat so that I can see what they are, because 7 and 17 can sometimes sound the same over a faulty internet connection.
One of the dungeon masters at Wizards who's running a Avernus game hooked up Avray, which is a Discord bot, and like you just / init begin, and it just rolls everybody, and then it has a little pop-up that tells you where everybody's ranked, and so you can page through it. And I'm like, this app saves me so much time. So I think there's something to be said for like there are digital, like I do miss having the dice rolling and the tension that you get when you're watching to see what the results are, and I feel the loss of that because we did sort of emulate that with a dice roller in a 10 Candles game this week, because 10 Candles it's less about what is the final number, aggregate number of your rolls, but what is how many ones and how many sixes did you roll. And so using a dice roller app for that actually is still pretty like we had the shared moments where everybody was in the chat trying to count out how many ones and sixes we got, and had that shared sense of like achievement when you got the success, and the shared sense of despair when you didn't get the success and you failed, and everybody you could hear the audible like ohs that you don't get like with a lot of the dice rollers, and suddenly you don't get when you're just rolling like your attack roll in D&D. So I think that was a nuance where like certain types of roll calculations with dice rollers are not as rewarding as others. And so like I think with systems like 10 Candles, or I think Vampire also works that way, there are ways in which like you're rolling for success versus failures on your dice that's just about counting how many of a certain number you get, where you can kind of get that feeling still on a virtual roller, but with D&D it's because it's about the final number, you kind of don't get that thrill anymore, and I'm sad about that. I trust my players though. But yeah, it's often just a lot easier for tactical reasons to go with a roller.
I have a question. Are there any dice rollers that give you a satisfying die rolling noise? Because that's really the only reason I use actual dice. It's like I use like the big metal one in one of the felt little cases so everybody can hear it. I miss that when I use dice rollers.
I can certainly think of many of the apps that do make a noise, but I can't say that any of them are really very satisfying. And certainly I kind of agree with Monty that there's nothing quite as satisfying as the feel of a couple of dice in your hand, getting ready to make that roll. I played, sort of speaking of like how the dice mechanic, the dice roller, virtual or real effect is affected by what game you're playing. I played several games of Fiasco via Roll20, and that is actually a case for me where Roll20 really shined because of its high customizability. Because in Fiasco, you have a big pool of dice that you roll, and then there's a lot of the dice remain on the table and they get passed around, and they become a token in the game. And that's not really a thing that is very easy to do on a virtual tabletop. I found a random web page where somebody explained how to do it in Fiasco, and it is actually pretty darn easy and pretty satisfying, I found, to be able to roll a big bunch of D6s and then see them on the table and then be passing them around from player to player. So, what else? There's a couple of features have been spat out here that I just want to underscore that I forgot. I can't remember who mentioned the ability in Discord to actually alter per user audio levels. That's amazing. I totally forgot about that, but yeah, we totally had a player who was was very low and very muted, and I could just go into Discord and say 150%, and let's just make that user loud. That is huge, and I don't know any other video chat that offers that. Likewise, I'll point out in Vorpal board, one of the things they give you is every user gets a cursor, so you can then point and say, I want to move here. Here's where I want to go, and that just seems so obvious to me. How does not every virtual tabletop have that? Instead, we end up going, I guess I want to go west 5 squares? No, the other west, left, up from George there. In
Roll20, the key thing is click and hold, sends out a map thing. And if you're the DM, you can hold shift and do the same thing, and that actually recenters everyone's viewpoint on that point as well, which I have used in our streams to control basically the battle cam for our streams. So there's fun tricks, and there actually is a lot of depth to the other virtual tabletops. I've wanted to check out Astral Tabletop as well as Foundry VTT have both come highly recommended. So I've been trying to find the opportunity to just give both of those a spin and see what they do differently and how they work as well, because they've been getting a lot of really good reviews recently.
I actually had one of my players do a demo of Foundry this week, and it looks amazing. Like there's a huge amount of customization that you can do for the battle mapping. It has all like built-in rulers and things. It's very much designed for like if you were playing minis. I'm pretty sure this is a very good virtual tabletop version of it. So if you want to do tactical D&D, like to the nth degree, like I definitely would recommend that. It was super cool to get that demo. It also has like special effects that you can overlay over everything, and so we were doing rain effects, we were doing glow effects. It lets you set up walls, and then you can set up lighting, and so as your players move their little minifigs through it, you actually have realistic representations of what they would actually, like what the fog of war would clear for them in terms of their visibility from light sources. And I'm like, this is insane. It's like you feel like you just designed your own RPG, like CRPG game, and then you put your players into it on this virtual tabletop.
In the other side of my life, I do projection design, and I have always wanted to use a projector as a light source over my 3D terrain so that I could create real-world fog of war. And I had a prototype rigged up, but I can't drill into my ceiling and mount a projector. The throw distance doesn't work out. But the fog of war stuff is actually the one element of a VTT that I would love to have in the real world. The other kind of real world thing that I would kind of love to have as a DM in real world play is the tracking things like the monster's hit points and the math thing, because I'm so bad at math, and just the fact that I can just put in -6 damage actually was a time saver for me for running the game.
Yeah, for another virtual tabletop that does some really impressive stuff with lighting, I would recommend checking out D20 Pro. That's, and again, I think your trade-off there is the time you're spending setting up your maps to do all the right lighting stuff. But man, does it look gorgeous! And there's an app actually to hook into what Monty was saying there. That app was originally developed not for online play, although it is used that way now, but originally for use on like very large surfaces. Right, so you would get like one of your Microsoft Surface or something like that, and you would all gather around it. So you get that kind of augmented reality play of the automation that you're talking about wanting, Monty, but we're still physically near each other, which maybe is less pertinent these days. Any other killer features that folks love in some piece of software or wish was in other pieces of software?
Can I turn the conversation slightly?
Yeah, sure.
My favorite thing in any RPG running conversation is what props do people use? I want to talk about props because I don't know if everybody else does this, but like almost every game I'm in, like some player or me eventually starts creating a playlist for this game. Because as a DM, when I'm crafting content, I'm looking for inspiration sources. So I'm already there looking for music, whether it's pop song or it's actually like background music that helps me the theme and kind of focus the tone that I want for a game. And so like since we've moved digital and I don't actually get to see people and I can't show them maps or like maps that are tea-stained and with all sorts of cool fonts and stuff and hand out props, like I have moved to like, well, now I need to do more audio props, sounds, background effects. With 10 Candles, one of the things that you do with that game system is at the start of it, you record all of the players recording a message to themselves, which like dramatically you play again at the end of the session once everybody's dead, because again, it's a tragic horror. That's not a spoiler, by the way. So like I did a whole thing where like I had people record in advance. I did like audio treatments onto the recording, made it sound broken up, added background sounds, and then like played it, and it was very dramatic and very intense. And it was such a good experience. I'm like, I want to do this more. And so like every now and then I'll throw in a soundtrack into a song, and like you can hear like you can feel the difference that it makes for players, and that like it instantly like snaps people into this frame of mind. And I've been finding that is not something I would have done as much of in person, because like somehow thinking about getting all the paperwork, getting my setup, getting everybody here, making sure there's food and drink, like that overwhelms my bandwidth as a DM when I'm doing in-person games. But like when it's remote, I'm like, I just need to get my drink, feed myself, and then like here's some cool soundtracks while we play.
My gut tells me Brittany does some audio production and maybe has something to add here.
Yeah. It's funny though, we don't do it live, right? We don't do it while we're playing. Everything's added after for the viewer. So I'm thinking, we, I'll add certain voice effects if if I want to add some extra enhancement to like a ghostly sound or a kind of flashback, or we use tabletop audio, actually use tabletop audio tracks for our ambient noise and certain music effects, which we huge plug for that site, because there's a lot of great resources there. But yeah, it all comes after. So I'm thinking like, oh, I wonder, like, are we not playing to our fullest, But technically, it would be worse for me to edit it later if I'm having to edit over audio that's already inside there, or a sound effect, or any type of prop. Yeah, so it's all after the fact, unfortunately, but it's for so our listeners. I said viewers, but I meant our listeners can get all of that stuff after the fact. I will say for my at-home Masks game, it really is fun how you're on the internet, you can quickly Google image something that you're trying to explain. I do a Sailor Moon transformation, and you're like, I'm talking about this one, and you can just like quickly Google it, throw the image into Discord, and everyone sees it, and it's like a fun thing. And also I missed a session. I missed our last session, but I went to our Discord and scrolled through the random images and GIFs, and I was like, oh my, what happened in this game? It's fun to have a record of those like random things that they were doing. It did not tell me what they were doing at all. It was not a good recap, but it was really fun to see kind of the random references they pulled in. But at a table, other than like maybe pulling something up on your phone and being like, it's this, or maybe sketching it out, like you just don't have that quick access and that kind of documentation. So like the visual props are a big easy win you can do on any of the platforms, whether you're in Zoom or you're in Discord or Roll20.
There's a number of things that you can get to sort of enhance your game visually, and there's also some audio filters you can get that, like for a recorded game or a nightmare, like I wouldn't want to produce with that, but it's something there's Snap Camera does the same sort of filters that you can do with like Snapchat, but some of them are more animated. We did that. We did a Simbaroom game recently, and we had a witch character. So every time he did cast a spell, he would like put on like the like negative light stuff, and he would look terrifying. So there's a lot of fun stuff you can do with that there. You can look like Sailor Moon if you want to, and you can look like it the whole time. And there's another one that has a similar name that does similar things for sounds, but it is kind of buggy. I want to say it's called like Zoom Snap or something. It's kind of buggy, but it's an interesting idea. Like, we've had a lot of robots on our streamed games. It's just like almost every game has a robot, as you do. And a couple of them, I think, have had like robot voices. And that's kind of fun. Other props, the tiny plastic hands you can get that go on your fingers. Endless comedy. We got like a year. We got like a year of comedy out of like 3 of those. Highly recommend.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Anyone else? Any other prop work that you've moved into digital space? Yeah. I
thought of another one. I don't use this for games, but I absolutely do want to use this for games. But I'm thinking of AR effects and using, like Snap Camera, which is like a Snapchat plugin for your camera, basically, that will do different effects and make you look like a demon, or make you look like an angel, or make it look like your eyes are big, or that it's snowing. And I think those could, I'm like, oh man, I want to do that next game that I play. That seems really fun. Getting mixed reality stuff, augmented reality stuff, which seems really, really cool. And not, if you've already got the computer and you've already got the camera, the layer on top of that is not super heavy. Yeah.
I mean, we've always had a little bit of light cosplay in our games. So in our stream games, all of the players usually have, like Kelly had a pair of goggles, and we've had helmets and all sorts of, and cat ears and all sorts of fun stuff that have always made a feature in that way. But I think beyond audio props, and I just want to second tabletop audio. Awesome. The other big kind of prop that relates back to battle maps is, where are you going to get your maps from? If you are going to use maps and tokens and minis and things like that. And I will say the thing that I do love is, like, with one of the advantages of Roll20 is that if you do shell out the money for the monster manual, you now have all the tokens for every monster in the monster manual, and same for the modules. You get the maps that are in them, and they're integrated into Roll20, which is a really big time saver if you are using D&D 5e. I think it's worth mentioning that. For myself, because we are live streaming, we can't just use art from anywhere as a map, because we want to make sure that we are protecting the copyright of the artists who spent so much time and effort to create those. Now, of course, that's not necessarily a problem for a home game, but I will mention that there's a lot of really talented, incredible cartographers that have Patreons that are creating beautiful and gorgeous and completely gameable maps. And I think that I really encourage supporting these artists. Many of them will bombard you with more maps than you could ever need for like $1. And well, there's too many specifically to list right now. Off the top of my head, there's just so many of them. I think that there's more cartographers making amazing maps that you can spend more time trying to find the perfect map than you could ever spend making one yourself on your own with mapping software. Although there is fantastic mapping software if you do want to make something completely bespoke. So whether you're time strapped and you just want to find something beautiful, or whether you want to create something on your own, I do think the maps do add a very beautiful and evocative visual, particularly some of the amazing artwork that is being created now. And so the only thing that I'll just end that off with is the people that are making the map making software, people like Tabletop Audio who are creating amazing audio, people who are creating amazing artwork, they have Patreons, they have things. This is the time that artists need to be supported, and many of them, it's very difficult to fully like imagine just how much of a difference $1 for an amazing artist can make, but it actually does do that. So consider that if that art is having an amazing impact on your game, it's probably worth $1.
I will toss out one other sort of AR effect that you can do very cheaply, which I found us doing on for some of my Fiasco games. Is Zoom has that feature that will let you replace your background even if you don't have a green screen. You can get yourself a green screen, which is just a green sheet is probably enough. But even if not, just use that silly Zoom feature. Yeah, it doesn't always look perfect, but in some of my Fiasco games, we ended up getting very into kind of one-upping each other by trying to make our backgrounds look like the setting that we were in for various scenes. And so you had all these players just constantly think, oh, we're in a we're in a nightclub, and then everybody's, and it's just really fascinating, especially if you're looking at like grid view, which is personally my favorite way to look at videos with a group of role players. If you're looking at grid view and everyone's background kind of matches or kind of looks like a thing, that I feel like that really pulls you in.
Yeah. Or even to keeping track of like if you split the party at all, these
Right.
three are in like the dungeon and
Yeah.
these three are like above ground. Like that's really, that's interesting. I like that.
I'm going to throw out there that I wanted to take it a step further and somehow integrate using Google Maps, and because you can actually walk in Google Maps into a game at some point. I keep throwing links because I keep setting my games in actual places, and I keep throwing the Google link to people. My players haven't actually actively used it yet, but I'm going to get them there. We're like, now you're adventuring, and like go actually walk the street, and I think that's going to be really fun because we can actually react off of the actual real world environment and kind of like it's a fun psychic space, I think, to be in. Doesn't work for every system. Clearly, that's not a D&D thing, but for a lot of the other game systems, Monster of the Week or 10 Candles, I think it's a really fun way. And particularly because we're all stuck at home, so you can go travel some remote part of the world. You can set your game in, like, I don't know, the UK and, like, go wander the streets of London as part of the game and make everybody go do that.
Okay, great. I'm gonna. We're approaching the half hour remaining point, so I want to get us into our Q&A. So I'll just remind everyone who's in the chat, if you have a question that you would like to pose to us, please just put the word "question" at the front, and then your question there. Helps us if you try to keep it concise. Don't write a whole paragraph. And go ahead and get your questions in, and we'll get some showing here. Let's see. And I said that as if I was promising really to get one up here quickly. I will. Here we go. Okay. Let's have this one here from Pete B77, who asks, what potential technology would most enhance your online gaming experience? Does anyone have a potential? It doesn't exist, it sounds like, is the question. What can we imagine we would love to have?
Yeah.
Please, thank you, Pete. I'm hoping that you're working on that.
Do you remember in Willy Wonka when you could put yourself inside of the TV and then transport yourself somewhere else? That I will just go somewhere else through the internet. That's what I want.
I would make VR headsets more comfortable to wear. Mine, yeah, right? Because then there's so many applications of feeling like you're in the same space with someone and sharing a virtual tabletop even, but I can't wear, my VR headset for longer than an hour-ish, right? But I'd love to just comfortably wear one for 3 hours and sit at my desk and be with the people I'm trying to play with. So if that's a thing, hardware tech changes.
I really want, I feel like this maybe exists in some places and I just don't know where to find it, but I really want some kind of chat, video or just audio chat that allows for side conversations. I want to have an aside with the person next to me that not everyone needs to hear, and I don't know, does that exist? I don't know.
There
can jump to a different channel.
Zoom and Roll20 chat, not audio, but like text chat, you can target just one person.
Right.
But you can only send one message that way. The thing that I like about Zoom is that when you target just one person with your message, Zoom kind of automatically shifts your settings so that you can respond to just them. So you can have those little text-only side conversations, which I kind of like, because if you're playing a game and you have video open and you can see everybody's face, you're focusing on everybody's face a lot more than you would around the table, and you can see that they've kind of muted themselves here but are off talking. I feel like that would be a little bit more distracting online than it is at the table. So I really don't mind having side conversations be text only.
One thing we do on different games is actually use the deafen feature. So we actually block people out of a conversation really quickly just for secrets. So we can do a talky secrets thing, and then we can undeafen people. So that's one way to do the opposite of what you asked.
In the realm of the truly fantastic, wouldn't it be cool if you could use the Inception technology to play D&D?
Yes.
And maybe it speaks to the whole potential of virtual play and everything. Although I will say, in the meantime of things, there are some. I remember years and years ago using the world builder in Neverwinter Nights and using the GM mode in video games, and maybe we're going to get something like that for Baldur's Gate 3? I don't know. I had no inside information of that, but certainly other existing games do have these features into them, and so those potentially could be. I'm sure there are massive communities that are built around using these games for using video games for role-playing games, and it would be just cool to see those things get pushed forward a little bit more, because I think that one of the biggest things with actually a high fidelity game environment is that if you don't have the asset for the right monster, you all kind of have to play pretend with it. Like as things get higher and higher fidelity and more detailed, it actually makes for a lot more work to craft those experiences.
Ooh, Paul, I think you're muted.
Sorry.
Everybody gets one.
Darn it! Okay.
Should have a counter.
Here, I'm gonna push another question up for us. This is from Haruma Chico, who asked, what do you do about maps? Where are your primary sources? What do you use to make your own?
We've been having a blast with Dungeon Fog for making your own map. It's a great resource for, I'd say more like dungeony settings, but it has been a lot of fun to play around with it. They have dynamic lighting options and a lot of different tools and assets to be able to use and manipulate. So that's one that I've been playing around with to make my own maps.
I've used Dungeon Scroll, which I believe is still in beta. But it has layers, kind of like Photoshop, which I really like, because sometimes I'll want to make a dungeon that has multiple levels but has the same general shape. So Dungeon Scroll has been super helpful for me.
Anyone else? I would throw out there one thing I've done on Roll20 is no map. Just use their built-in grid and pretend it's a white, I was gonna say whiteboard, but like a battle mat, like you would use a battle mat at a tabletop, right? You don't always need. I think sometimes we can get drawn into like, oh, it's online and I have all these art resources, and so my map must be gorgeous and laid out and everything. Do you really need that? Can you just draw a couple boxes and lines and move some tokens around? Maybe that's faster. Maybe that gives you a little more ability to sort of throw something on the fly.
To your point, I have. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go right ahead.
I just wanted to joke about the fact that I do that sometimes for like random encounters, but I elevate it a little bit, and my Google searches have all been destroyed by the fact that I'm looking for picture of grass taken from exactly a 90-degree angle, so I can like put that over the grid on the map player.
One of the cartographers that has worked on several of the recent Wizards of the Coast official modules, Dyson Logos, has an incredible blog and Patreon, and basically he has made a map of everything that you could ever possibly need for Dungeons & Dragons. They are black and white, but his style is really, really lovely. If you are looking for full color maps, but that are created in a high fidelity way and you don't want to make them yourself, I've been recently using maps by Neutral Party and 2 Minute Tabletop, which are both very, very excellent. I love both their art styles, but there are so many more. The community of artists is gigantic, and I actually feel like listing too many of them, I'm going to omit somebody who work that I really love and admire, because there are so many amazing artists.
Yep. I hear that.
I'll just give a shout out for Devin Rue if we're gonna give map shout outs.
Yeah, for sure.
I agree with Monty that like if you have the means and can support independent artists who are making like amazing content already, and you do want something extra special, this is a great time to do it. So just double down on that one.
All right, here's another question from Puka Prime, who asks, what's the most positive change you've experienced with this change to an online format, and what's the most challenging?
My most positive change is that when we finish streaming, I'm already home. I know that's such a silly thing, but legit, it's like when we would go to stream or like go to play, it was like, okay, it's like 45 minutes for me to get to Monty's house. I need to take transit or like a taxi or something. And then, when we finish up, it's like, okay, I'm going to be home pretty late tonight. But now it's like, all right, we're done. Cool. I'm going to go make dinner, and I'm in my pajamas in 30 seconds, and it's a good time. If I were to say the most challenging thing is, I do miss the kind of camaraderie that comes from playing at a table with a group of people. There's this certain essence of the shared atmosphere that you kind of miss out on as soon as you move to a virtual system. So those are my two pieces.
We would have dinner together, so I think that the act of like eating together as a group is something that that I miss.
I very much miss that too.
Anybody else have a positive? That's my favorite part of this question.
I love that people are so available now. In a way that, like, it's much easier to just get corralled. Like, I don't actually play. I'm not a streamer, so I don't have an audience that I need to satisfy in any way. I'm just like trying to get a couple of friends to play a game with me, and it's a lot easier. I can send out like a doodle invite, be like, fill in your dates that you're available, and then I could just throw a game together. And most of the time, people don't have anything better to do than to hang out with me and play an RPG game. So challenging, though. I mean, I'll say I think learning the nuances that like different games have different needs, which I didn't realize. But like crunchy D&D sessions, when it was in person, I could probably just draw on a piece of paper and make it work. And now now there's pressure to make it look cool and have little things that move around. And like a lot of that planning, I think is not stuff I had signed up for when I wanted to DM, but is now a thing that I'm learning. But there's some very cool tools out there, and thank you guys for a lot of the recommendations. I'm looking up some of these afterwards.
Great.
I think positive for me is it sort of changed the focus of sort of the experience, where it used to be for me at home games anyway, it's like 50% I'm here for the game and like 50% I'm here to be around people and be social, and that's a really good thing. That's a great thing, and I miss it. But moving to virtual with so much less cross-table talk, and the fact that like the whole role of snacks is like completely changed, honestly. So that like you're way more like game focused, and I've found like I've had a lot more like profound sort of RP experiences because there is that focus. But on the flip side, if I come to a virtual game and like it's been a long week and I am already done, the chances of me sort of flipping that on its head and getting into it are like very low compared to, I've had a long week, I'm going to go hang out with my friends and go be with them and play a game. Like there's less of that sort of transformative nature for me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. All right.
I think I do want to answer this one.
Yeah, go for it.
My favorite thing, my most positive change is the amount of information that is readily available. I've been playing 5e for a very long time, and I still have to ask, is banishment a wisdom or a charisma saving throw? And I don't have to ask that anymore because someone can just click on banishment and it'll show up in the chat or link to the spell. And first of all, a lot of the people that I play with, when I started playing with them, they were beginners. I kind of taught them how to play D&D. And for them to have access to a lot more resources now online, because we're all sitting at a computer, I have noticed, given them a lot more ownership over the game. And it makes me feel great. I don't have to look up the spell anymore. They can just send me the spell and be like, here's the information. And I love that. I was also recently... I just learned how to play Blades in the Dark. I love it. But the hardest thing for me is character creation. Like across any game that has any kind of like statted character sheet, it makes me about as anxious as doing my taxes in April. So like for the first time, it freaks me out. But resources, especially that Roll20 has, of like the character creation process, where it's fill this out, boom, 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 here's all that. We got past character creation in 15 minutes and we were playing the game. And I love that about online gaming. But the challenge is, I don't know if I have anything that everyone hasn't already said. One of my players is she's like a professional level baker, and she would make something for us every single Sunday. And she'll tell us on Sunday when we all get together. She's like, "Oh, I made these oatmeal raisin cookies today. Oh, I made, this or that." And like, I wish you were all here. And we're like, us too.
Yeah.
I miss my players. I miss the food.
Yeah. Did anybody else want to take a stab at this one before I move us on?
Mine is really quick. I think it's the trade-off on time. I think the positive is that everyone can get to the computer fast. Everyone can it's the flexibility of time. But then on the other side, we've all mentioned a bunch of things that make the online playing process take a lot longer than if you were in person, rolling for initiative, just the crosstalk that can't really happen, and you have to give each other space. Like, I'm finding that my at-home games are taking longer than I would think that they would take. So even though you don't have that, 45-minute ride home, or you can kind of eat while you're playing on mute, and you can kind of multitask, I feel like there's everything kind of comes out in the wash. It's on the time aspect.
Great. All right, here's a question from Josh Matthews, which I'm picking because there's actually a couple of other questions in the queue that are kind of similar. He asks, for running, any tips for running games that rely heavily on particular atmosphere, like 10 Candles, mostly directed at Xiao Ling here. But I see a couple of other questions here that talk about like moody or dark, or how do you get that mood when you're remote?
For a while, am I on? Okay, for a while we had a candle cam, so I would stream a separate stream of the candle so that people could watch it flicker and die, and I would turn all the lights off. That was one thing we did. I think audio is a huge part of it, and usually what I try to do at the beginning of a game is to set that tone and mood. So when in my prep work for a game, I'll often prepare in advance like particular lines that I want to convey about setting. I love horror games, so I'm also a big Cthulhu player of various Cthulhu systems, everything from Trail of Cthulhu to Call of Cthulhu to Cthulhu Dark, which is all of 3 pages of fun, if you ever want to try it. Having like elements of horror that I know I want to integrate. Like, I think this week we had swirls. We had swirls everywhere. They were just creepy swirls. You would look at blood and there'd be swirls. You would talk about this and there'd be swirls. And so planning in advance the kind of rhythm and cadence that you want to invoke in your narrative. And so this is an area where I actually, when I was in college, there was a whole class on oral storytelling that I think comes into play, is that, like, how do you invoke mood and tone in the moment? And it's like, well, you actually have to practice your verbal communication skills and make sure that, like, you're thinking about that. How do you lower your voice? How do you draw out certain words? How do you make, like, you can make the effect of echoes by repeating a word again and again and again and again and lowering. And so it's a lot of it, it's actually through control and through kind of your performance. So I would say I actually have been looking into dialect coaches and acting courses. I'm actually going to start an improv class next week, because as I have been doing more and more of these games online, I'm like, you know what? I've always wanted to work on these skills. I want to be able to do a dialect in another language, and like, I currently don't have things to go out to do anymore, so there's a disposable income that I would like to like go support somebody like an actor and have them teach me a skill set that would make gameplay more fun for my players. So that's kind of my take on that. Hope it was helpful.
That's great. And anybody else have any comments for expressing mood in an online game?
I'll just jump in and say one of the ways to learn mood and atmosphere is to, and just echoing what Xiaoling said, that part of learning that is that this is an oral medium in such a big way. And one of the great forms of oral media and oral storytelling that we currently have accessible to us are audiobooks, podcasts, and radio drama. And sometimes a great inspiration might be go, that fantasy author that you've been wanting to read forever, get the audiobook version, because some of them are really excellent and you can just listen to the performance. And in fact, I will even echo with Call of Cthulhu specifically. One of the Lovecraft omnibuses, the reader of those is really a great speaker, and just the creepiness of the voice of the reader is something that can be emulated. And so sometimes just learning how words alone can convey atmosphere and how to control your voice is something that you can pick up by consuming media that uses it. And so podcasts, audiobooks, and particularly audio drama might be good things to fill up your listening list and get some great inspiration in the process.
Excellent. Thanks so much. I'm gonna push this question unless anybody else had another thought on mood. Great. I'm gonna push this question forward. It looks to me like it's getting cropped in my view, but I think I can get the gist of it. So when not using a VTT with detailed map and movement, but the need arises for everyone to be in sync with positioning, how do we do that? Any thoughts?
I played a game of Spelljammer-inspired D&D on Twitch called Starward Bound, and we did it for nearly 2 years, and we did it entirely theater of the mind. And it was run by Pruitt. Pruitt loves a cinematic scene, like, so much, and so doing that, we got a lot of experience. Like, how do you plan out a set-piece battle that's clear, without having that information in front of you? And so a lot of what we ended up doing, there's some of it where you just kind of are going to have to be a little bit loosey-goosey and say, I want to be within 30 feet of this person. I want to be within 60 feet of this person. And just sort of being okay with saying, okay, that makes sense. And kind of going with it in that way is probably going to be important. As a player, I would make little maps for myself if I really was having trouble understanding something. And I would maybe do something like that. Like, we've done that when we were in our super lo-fi, like, pre-streaming time, when we were just playing games together. We got a whiteboard and a really, really new black, like, wet erase marker. And just draw it really, really simply, and have that just in front of our camera whenever we needed it to be there. If you have the capability of doing something like that. We've also done the same thing where we literally just text each other pictures of the map. We're very experienced at doing this in a very lo-fi way. But really descriptions, clear, simple descriptions about where things are in context to other places is really the most key thing that you can do. And just go with it and keep moving forward, even if things are a little bit off of where you might think that they should be, I think is my recommendation.
I'll also jump in and say that, like, my low-tech version is sometimes I've used PowerPoint, and I'm not ashamed.
Nice.
It's real fast. You can just share screen, move things around, and I don't have to do the whole setup of a VTT. There may or may not be other people at Wizards of the Coast who also do this.
Yeah, I mean, and you could just use, like, Google Slides, right? And then that's implicitly shared. Just pass around the link, and off you go. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Great. Okay. I think we have time for one more, so I want to get this one in here because I like it. What have been your favorite games for running in Theater of the Mind?
I'm going to go ahead and say I mentioned before that I've run Monster of the Week, and I think Monster of the Week lends itself really well to Theater of the Mind. And to go off of something that Emma said in the last section was actually when I'm doing Theater of the Mind for Monster of the Week, I'll have a really cool location. Like, I think in one of our episodes they went to just like a science facility. And so I looked up blueprint for science facility on the internet, and I just like found a random blueprint. And that way I was able to use that to help me out in describing like, okay, left down this hallway, and like being able to explain where the doors were, where the rooms were for myself, even if I wasn't sharing that map with the other people. Monster of the Week has been really fun for Theater of the Mind, and the players have had a lot of fun exploring the space and asking questions that help us build that space together. And I think that's been really awesome.
Excellent. Anybody else got a favorite? Yeah.
I mean, my obvious favorite is 10 Candles, and I'm also watching the chat thread here, and apparently people are designing a swirly displacer squirrel game, which I'm into, because my 10 Candles game next week actually is going to be based on Secret of Nim, where all the players are going to be little rats, and the world has gone dark, and everything is shut off, and now what do you do? So, I think any horror game lends itself super, super well to Theater of the Mind, because it's less about the tactics of how am I executing the play and more about what is my intention, how am I going to engage, and a lot of it's about role-playing, which I'm like, that's been super, super fun. My friends group, I think, divides into two groups of people, either people who are like, I cannot take horror. I cannot take another ounce of horror in my life anymore because the world is terrible, and people who are like, the world is terrible. Please pile on all the horror. It's immensely cathartic, and I just want to get all of this out in a place and have my characters die in horrible ways, and then come away and feel really good about that in a safe place. And I'm like, I fall into that latter camp, which is why I really love a lot of the horror stuff that's going on right now. So, yeah. Any horror genre game. I think Monster of the Week kind of falls into more of a horror style play as well. I've already said Cthulhu Dark, Trail of Cthulhu, Call of Cthulhu, 10 Candles. Go try it out, friends.
Awesome. I have a rec, which I'm a huge horror fan, but this is actually not a horror rec. A couple of weeks ago on this channel, we played a game of Cheat Your Own Adventure, which is a very lightweight story game. It's all of one page and it's free. Go search for it, download it. It's great. Not only is it great for Theater of the Mind, but it's great for online virtual play, especially if you're trying it out for the first time ever, because it's short, it's sweet. We played it in an hour, and it is structured in a turn-based way where basically folks are taking turns in saying things. And so that structure just makes it so much easier to just pass the baton around, and you don't have those moments of, ooh, I'm accidentally talking over, because just the way the game is structured. So definitely recommend you check that out. Anybody else got
I think story games.
Yeah.
Story games are where it's at for Zoom games, especially just the sort of lower fi they are. I'm trying to think of the most successful sort of online games that I've done. And it's things like For the Queen, where you're just part of a queen's retinue and you're answering questions about, your relationship to her and everybody else who's going on. You're building this thing, and the information required to do that is very, very low. There's another game I think that might have been the most immersive sort of role-playing experience that I've had, is one that's called Tall Pines, which is meant to, it's a Twin Peaks-based game. So you just basically get the Twin Peaks soundtrack in the background, and you all pretend you're a bunch of different people in a Twin Peaksy sort of thing, and it really works because it's David Lynch and it's supposed to be abstract anyway, and it's supposed to kind of be discordant and not make much sense, and just you get as weird with it as you want to, and then even if it's super weird, at the end you just turn off Zoom and you're by yourself, and you know how to deal with how awkward it is after you've done all the Lynchy things. But yeah, I'd look to lo-fi story games myself.
Great. Okay, great. I think we're even a little over time here, so I should wrap us up. Just real quick before we go, I'm going to ask us to go around once more time and just remind folks where your stuff can be found online. Start us off, Brittany.
All right, yeah, I'm Brittany Leonagay. You can find me at D20Dames, d20dames.com. We are a D&D podcast, all femme cast. Episodes every other Tuesday, wherever you get podcasts. Yeah.
Awesome. Emma?
I'm Emma Lambert. I'm the comms director for WebDM. You can find us on Patreon and Twitch and YouTube at WebDM. We do advice for how to run and play your best role-playing games. And WebDM Show on Twitter. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Leon?
I'm Leon Barillero. You can find me at Barillion on Twitter, barillion.com. I don't stream or anything like that, but I am running my first game of Blades in the Dark, so follow me on Twitter and wish me luck.
Awesome. Dungeon Dudes.
I'm Monty Martin.
I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
We're the Dungeon Dudes. We're on YouTube there, and we have our Patreon and Twitch, which the YouTube URL, dungeondudes.com, will take you to everything.
We also have our live play campaign, which is called Shadows of Drakkenheim. That's Season 2. Season 1, which is called Dungeons of Drakkenheim, is available on our YouTube channel, but you can catch Shadows of Drakkenheim, which is coming back August 11th at twitch.tv/dungeon_dudes, Tuesday nights at 6 p.m. Eastern.
Great. Shelling?
I'm Xiaoling. You will not find me online because I work behind the scenes at Wizards of the Coast, but you can find many of our amazing products online at wizardsofcoast.com. Look for the D&D chats, and please appreciate the work of my many fine coworkers who work real hard to make sure they get that great content out to you. Thank you, everybody, for coming out to hear us talk.
Great. And I'm Paul Siegel, Wandering DMs. You can find us right here on Wandering DMs, Twitch or YouTube, and wanderingdms.com. Thanks, everyone, so much. This was a great, fun panel. I'm sure we could talk for another 5 hours easily. But we must go home. We already are home. We must get back to our lives. So thank you very much, everyone. And please have a good night and enjoy the rest of your Gen Con.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.